All right, good morning. My name is PJ Waters. I'm an Associate Extension Professor with Auburn University in the Cooperative Extension System of Alabama. I work primarily with oysters, and so that's why I'm here today to talk about oysters. And what we do in this lab primarily is looking at restoration opportunities for our oyster reefs in the bay and the estuary in Alabama. Oysters are very important for our estuaries. They are great filters of the water that are in the bay, and the reefs that they create produce a lot of habitat for other species that we find and enjoy in the bay. They also provide some shoreline protection with breaking up wave energy, and of course we like to eat them. So there's great numbers of benefits that we as humans derive from oysters. And one of the purposes of our work here is to help restore some of the reefs that we've lost over time so that we can continue to enjoy those benefits. When we look at the numbers of oysters or the types of oysters that we have, globally there's about 100 species of oysters. But locally here in Alabama, the eastern oyster is the commercially imported one. It's Chrysostrea virginica, so it's going to be the one that you see on the reefs or in the restaurants. Locally, that's really the only one that we're working with is that eastern oyster. Some of the predators of oysters that we concern ourselves with restoration, of course, the crabs like blue crabs and stone crabs can eat oysters and do eat oysters. There's some drums that eat on oysters and other shelled animals as a part of their feeding strategy. But the main one that we're focused on is a snail, a drilling snail. Now we call them drills, and that sort of captures a number of different species. But when you look at like crown conchs or the true oyster drills or whelks, all of these gastropods or snails will feed on shellfish, oysters included. Anytime you've seen a shell on the beach that has the perfect little hole drilled in it, that's what's done now. Of course, it kills the oyster, which is no good for the oyster, but it's just how that species feeds. So our work is looking at putting oysters in the system that are a little bit bigger and maybe stronger and able to survive that predation pressure. And the way we do that is by suspending our oysters up off the bottom to get them away from some of those drills. Okay, so our reefs being obviously very important to the ecosystem, and when we talk about restoring them, we're putting more oysters on those reefs. Where we get those oysters and where oysters live is an important question and something to consider. When oysters reproduce or spawn, when it's time for that larvae to settle and become a spat, there's two steps. It settles first out of the water column, and while before it sets, that's the second step, and changes or metamorphosizes into a spat, it has the opportunity to move around just a little bit and kind of find the area that it wants to set. Now, its primary target is something that's hard, whether it's a piling or a bulkhead or a rock or a piece of concrete or another oyster shell. That's what it's going to prefer. If it lands in the mud or another soft substrate, it won't survive. And so when we talk about where oysters live, primarily they're going to try and attach to hard things. When we do it for our work, we're going to give them, oyster shell. The shell that we use is seasoned through the recycling program. That starts at the restaurants. You go to the restaurant, you eat your oysters. The restaurant sends the shells through the recycling program. They'll spend some time on dry land with letting all the soft tissue, the bits of oyster, other food, butter, cheese, whatever, fully decay so that the oyster shell itself is perfectly clean. We take those to our hatchery on Dauphin Island. The hatchery folks there will spawn oysters and then care for that larvae through that 10 to 14 day period and then set them on these shells.